Welcome, one and all. 欢迎光临. Today, we're going to cover the Mandarin Blueprint courses for members, people who've just joined, people who've been here for a while but maybe got stuck or aren't sure what to do next. And maybe you got a little bit of a motivation dip and you want to get back into it. Also, it's for people who are perhaps going steady along with the course. However, they are just finding themselves about to enter a new phase, and so they want to know what to expect coming forward. Now, we do have videos in the course that cover what's happening. However, those videos don't necessarily give you a chance to ask any questions or any struggles that you may have come across, and we also just want to make sure that you have a chance to really get going with the Mandarin Blueprint method in whatever course that you're in, because we can make the map as beautiful and pretty as possible, but unless you walk the path, well, then it's not that useful, is it? So if any of you don't know me, my name is Phil Crimmins. My friend Luke and I created Mandarin Blueprint to fix the broken Chinese education system once and for all, and our courses are helping thousands reach university-level Chinese in a fraction of the time. And today we're going to talk about several of our courses. Now, all of our courses here are Pronunciation Mastery, the Blueprint Phase 1, Phase 2, Phase 3, Phase 4, Phase 5. We'll talk about those today. We are not going to talk about Pronunciation Mastery today. We'll talk about that next time. Last time I did an onboarding live stream, it lasted 3 hours, which was enjoyable, but I do have other things that I got to get to for the company. So 3 hours is a bit too much. So I had to constrain it a bit, but we are going to talk about all the phases of the blueprint, which is phases 1 through 5, the intermediate, upper intermediate, and advanced courses. And we're going to, even though Habit Building Bootcamp and Mandarin Immersion Masterclass are a part of the Blueprint, and Pronunciation Practice Toolkit is another one of our courses, we're actually going to hold off on those this week. But we are going to cover Mandarin Speaking and Listening Kickstarter, because plenty of you have just joined this course this week. And so we want to make sure that if you are in the Kickstarter, that you have a chance to know what that's all about. And we do have a new course coming soon called the Phrase Vault that hopefully will be out to the public in, I think the truth of the matter is probably going to be in August. I talked with our Chinese production team, and they said that getting it out by the end of July is probably ambitious. It was the way they put it tactfully to me. So I thought, okay, well, if it takes longer, that means that's an implication that they're putting a lot of effort into it and there's a lot of value being created. And of course, I'm getting my hands in there a lot, and so is Luke. And so we're trying to make the best possible course we can for you there. So look out for that. It's coming in August. All right. So let's get into what we're going to talk about today. And I wanted to start off with the Mandarin Speaking and Listening Kickstarter. This course is one of the courses in our lexicon that is a top-down course. And what that means is that we're starting from language that you're going to need in day-to-day life and teaching it to you from the need and then down to the practice. Whereas bottom up is more teaching from the component elements of the language and building up so that you're able to think. Now, in reality, you need both top down and bottom up. However, top down is most effective when you're at the beginning and also when you need to have extra practice. So if you're doing the Mandarin Speaking and Listening Kickstarter, the biggest challenge is definitely staying disciplined. So with any top-down course, because the... Oh, I thumbs up somehow. Because the content is not anchored to any foundational knowledge. It's just like, hey, this is how you say this thing. This is how you say, where's the toilet? This is how you say, how do I find the hospital? Because it's not anchored to anything that's foundational, it's harder to remember, and therefore you need to have lots of reps. You need to do things over and over. So it's a bit more like memorization that you would have to do for any kind of top-down learning. But luckily with the Mandarin Speaking and Listening Kickstarter, it is something you should do, especially at the beginning, because lots of repetition ensures that your mouth grows strong. There is at least one physical element to learning Mandarin, because making the different sounds of Mandarin Chinese requires you to use muscles in your mouth that you haven't developed, right? So getting the listen and repeat like gets your muscles to build up. If you're doing it right, your mouth muscles should actually hurt a little bit, kind of like they do if you've haven't been to the gym for a while, haven't lifted weights for a while, and then you do a heavy lift. Next day, your muscles hurt, right? Well, that's actually a sign that they're growing, right? So the Mandarin Speaking and Listening Kickstarter is a great chance for you to do that. And it's also important to remember that it's not forever. So while it does require more discipline than some of our other courses, there are only 31 lessons, and they get you to about 1,100 phrases that you'll have like in your arsenal, things that are very essential. In fact, one of the things I did for this course is I said, like, look, we're not really going to use too many adverbs, for example. If you're going to start off learning a language, just get the basics down, like noun, verb, object. Just get the stuff that can get your point across, build up your mouth muscles, and build up that neural dexterity. And what it has is this 7-step process to get you from like knowing nothing about these phrases to being able to speak them with alacrity. You'll be able to get them out very quickly. Now, it is not true to say that you will be fluent by the end of doing the Kickstarter. In fact, that is, you decidedly wouldn't be fluent by the end of the Kickstarter, because the only way to reach fluency is to be able to think. If you can face a problem and then your brain rises to the occasion and speaks at that point, then what that means is that you are able to communicate fluently. You can think your way through a problem. But top-down learning by its very nature is essentially just the memorization of facts. Now, because you need to memorize those facts, and it also has this mouth muscle building effect, that means that you get this benefit that will travel throughout all of your learning, but you must do bottom-up learning as well if you want to get to the point of being able to be fluent. It's just that if you only do bottom-up learning, for example, you haven't gotten into the habit of opening your mouth and speaking. So both are essential, and the Mandarin Speaking and Listening Kickstarter is a great way to get started. And by the way, because it is a longer course, because it is a course that is only about 30 days, if you go do a lesson a day, it can be a little overwhelming, but remember that you want to use the audio. You can use the audio files as many times as you want. There's a learn, listen, and repeat audio file. There's a think and produce audio file. There are immersion audio files with just the Chinese, and those you should have on in the background as much as possible. And then, of course, there are flashcards as well. So anything that you learn in the Kickstarter will come with spaced repetition flashcards that get you to produce the all of the phrases that you're learning there. So you get reps from learn, listen, and repeat. You get reps from the flashcards. You get reps from watching it on the actual course platform. You get reps from the think and produce file, and you get to listen to it over and over from the immersion file. And so all of those things together mean that you will, if you follow the process, it deals with the problem of top-down learning being too much unrelated information. So all I'm trying to get at here with that is just that the Speaking and Listening Kickstarter is a great way to get started with the course. It's a great way to build up your mouth muscles. You need to recognize that it's not the only thing you need to do. It's necessary but not sufficient to reach fluency, but it does get you to have quicker response times, have some neural dexterity, have some mouth muscle buildup, and that is why it's a great way to get started with the course. So what I'll do here is I'll just ask you guys in the chat if you have any questions about the Kickstarter. So let me just, let's see, I can put the chat on screen here, I think. Let's see. Oh, I guess I got to pop the chat out. Yeah, there we go. Okay. And so by doing that, I can now move that over here and make it a bit smaller so it fits. Okay, so let's see what people are saying here. Oh, geez. Okay. Keep having to move things around. My apologies. All right. So, Beat Flex says, I just began with phase 3. I'm a little confused how to handle the sentences. We will get to that in a few later in the live stream. Is the phrase vault similar to Close Master? That would be nice to have. I don't know what Close Master is, so I can't comment. Reading and understand. Sorry if I am from Germany. My English not good. No worries. I don't even listen to music in my car any longer. I have the Kickstarter playing all the time. That's great to know, Ballois. So yeah, tell me, Paul, what do you think of your ability to acquire the Kickstarter phrases by hearing them all the time? Is it starting to feel second nature to produce them? I'd be very curious to hear about that. Okay. Yeah, we'll get to that point about we'll get to the point about the phase 3 very soon. Leanna, I like the Kickstarter for being able to follow the music of the sentences, like where they emphasize boo or where they are louder or softer parts of the sentence. That's great feedback, Leanna. I'm glad to hear that. And I think that is definitely one of the things you can get with the Kickstarter, because while it is true that you can learn the principles of how Mandarin pronunciation works, you can learn all of the tongue positions and the tones and the tone pairs and how it flows in the sentence. You can learn the tone sandy rules and all of that. All of that is great. But the fact is that in many instances, native speakers will sort of break those rules to be a little bit more efficient in their language. And so always defer to a native speaker. Although when you defer to a native speaker, make sure that they're actually speaking Mandarin, not speaking some dialect. But still, there's the rules and then there's the reality, like the principle and the reality. And if you listen to like somebody in a broadcasting booth, they will follow all the principles to a T, but then how people actually speak in real life is slightly different. But it's like when you know the rules, then breaking the rules is easy to understand. I hope you can follow what I mean there. Let's see here. Finished the course on habits and now unit 4 of the pronunciation course. When should I start with the Kickstarter? Eric asks. Well, if you've done the pronunciation course, you're in a very good position to do the Kickstarter because you understand the principles of how to articulate the sounds. So if anything, the Kickstarter sort of serves as your ultimate pronunciation kind of practice guide. So I would just say that you can... So you're in Unit 4 pronunciation course. I mean, it's kind of up to you. I would say maybe finish the pronunciation course first and then go into the Kickstarter. But it's not like if you start the Kickstarter, it's going to be impossible for you. You know, you can just choose how you want. Like, I always want people to recognize that, like, with the blueprint, there is a linear order. But with things like pronunciation mastery, you can do that course many times. With Mandarin Speaking and Listening Kickstarter, if speaking and listening is more important to you, then you should do that early. If it's less important to you and you're kind of like, I want to get literate first, then you can kind of put it off until later while you're working on getting your characters up to snuff. So there is some flexibility here, which is, again, why we want to do these onboarding streams. So great. Okay, so that answered some questions about the Kickstarter. And if you guys have any more questions about the Kickstarter, let me know, and I will answer in the next stop for the Q&A. But basically, I'm just going to stop and look at the chat in between explaining each course. So don't think I'm ignoring you in between. I kind of have set times that I do that so that I can make sure that we cover all of that. And yeah, if you have, and also another thing too, if at any point you want to see any clarity about how this looks on the course platform, just let me know. I'm a bit of two minds about it because on the one hand, it's helpful to show how it looks on the course platform, but on the other hand, at the beginning of every course, there are videos that do that. And last time I did this live stream, it took 3 hours. So if you want to know how something technically works on the course, let me know and I will pull it up and show you. But if you're clear on the tech, then this will be more about the mindsets to have and answering any questions you might have. And just briefly, we have Eric saying, I've studied Chinese 20 years ago. I already know a lot of the characters and words. That's great. Yeah, that means that when you go through the blueprint, I don't know if you have the blueprint, but if you go through the blueprint, you can just skip the characters and words you already know and just fill in all the gaps in your knowledge. All right, so I'm going to move on to the next course. here, and then we'll get into questions again in a moment. All right. So as a reminder, the Mandarin Speaking and Listening Kickstarter falls into one of our many courses that are part of the Mandarin Blueprint suite of courses. We do have more courses planned, but the basic idea here is that you have your pronunciation mastery course. And this is, by the way, this is in the order that we built these. It's not necessarily the order that you should do them. It's just the order that we built them so that you understand kind of how the evolution of what we were doing here. And so in some sense, we said, okay, well, pronunciation is one of the most important things to get right early in the language. If you manage to get pronunciation right early, then that can serve you throughout your time learning Mandarin. So we built pronunciation mastery first. And then because we're nerds and we're kind of purists, we then built a massive curriculum that teaches 3,000 plus characters and, builds from character components into characters, into words, into sentences, into paragraphs, into stories that are all perfectly graded to your level. And that is what we call the Mandarin Blueprint method, or the blueprint. And that took us about 6 years to build. And we insisted that we build that before we build any top-down material. And that's because there's top-down material that had been out there before, but it was always leaving people out to dry. Like we had, for example, for years I used, about 6 months, I used pop-up Chinese and a little bit of Chinese pod back in 2013. And so this is like the very beginning of some of my Mandarin study. And what was so frustrating about those things is not that the content wasn't good. It's that it was all top-down. It was all just like, here's a scenario and here's what people would say. And you'd be like, okay, but like, I don't know any of these words. So I'm like learning the word while I'm learning the conversation. And you'd be like, well, yeah, this is really well recorded and the people have interesting accents and it sounds very native and all that, but I don't know, I can't keep it in my head, right? Like that was the thing that kept happening. So we were like, we don't want that to happen for people because we know that if you learn the characters properly and you understand how words work, which requires knowing the characters, and you understand that the grammar is actually pretty straightforward once you know the characters, then doing top-down material is like, well, first of all, it's not even really top-down at that point because you're basically, the characters and stuff. But then doing situational Chinese, let's think of it that way, is far more appropriate, right? So we wanted to make sure that if we were going to build any top-down material, that we didn't do it before building all of that very important foundation building material. And that's what the blueprint is. And then, like I say, after that, we felt like, okay, yeah, now we can make some top-down stuff, and we can integrate it with the blueprint if we want. And we also have the ability to make sure that whatever it is that you're doing in the top-down, we're always reminding you that, like, if you're struggling with this, if you only bought a top-down course and you didn't do any of the bottom-up stuff, then it's like, hey, if you're struggling, the reason is because you don't have enough of a foundation, and we have something for you. If I was struggling with pop-up Chinese or Chinese pod back in 2013, it was just like, sorry, we don't teach characters really. I guess you could try to learn by rote. There was no solution. And so that was really the motivation at that time. So let's get into what the Mandarin Blueprint method is by starting with phase 1. So maybe you're in phase 1 right now because you joined the Mandarin Blueprint Challenge. That's the first thing you'll do in the Mandarin Blueprint Challenge. Maybe you just bought the blueprint. Maybe you bought the blueprint a while ago and you didn't know, or you haven't started it yet, and so you're not sure what's to come. And of course, some people on this live stream may not have bought any of Mandarin Blueprint's products, so for the next period of time, you'll get to learn a little bit about what they're all about. So what's up with phase 1? Well, it is the biggest challenge of phase 1 is mastering the Hanzi movie method. Because it's all about learning characters and components. And if you're going to learn characters and components, the big aha moment that we had was learning characters the traditional way, learning by rote, is hugely time inefficient because it's not utilizing the elements of human memory that we're all born with, and we're all born with at strikingly amazing levels of accuracy. So what are we better at remembering? A 2D squiggle on a page or a human face? What are we better at remembering? The random strokes of a Chinese character or like what the difference between two objects. What are we better at remembering? The tone that is associated, the pronunciation and tone that is associated with a character that doesn't even show on the character's face because it's not a phonetic language, or where we are in the space of a room or places that we've been in our past. And our point is that if you understand that memory champions, memory athletes use people, objects, places, and actions to remember any random fact, and then you realize, oh, I could apply that to Chinese characters, you will be able to learn Chinese characters way faster. And I'm talking about everything. I'm talking about the pronunciation, the definition, the writing, and of course, the pronunciation and tone, the tone as well. And you'll remember all of it, and you'll remember it forever because they also come with SRS flashcards. So a great system for learning and a great system for reviewing. So mastering the Henze movie method does take a little bit of time. There are about 3,000 plus characters to learn to get to 99.4% of the language by frequency. And so it's worth it to spend time learning the method. There's about 7 steps to the method. And so at the beginning, it's like, oh, a 7-step process is it's a lot to keep in your mind. But people consistently report that it takes about 30 to 50 characters to get the method down, and then they can go use the method efficiently. So think about that. If it takes 30 to 50 characters to get it down, it wouldn't be worth it if there were only 100 characters to learn, but there are 3,000 characters to learn. So a crappy rote learning or poor mnemonic system for 3,000 characters, or learn a little bit of a method at the beginning for 30 to 50 characters, and then use a dang supercomputer power tool for the rest of the time. And so that's the biggest challenge of phase 1, is getting the Henze movie method down. So you want to take it slow at the beginning and listen carefully to the instructions. And if you follow that, you'll be able to use this method to quickly memorize a Chinese character in 30 seconds to a minute. And it really does work. So remember what I said. The Henze movie method utilizes techniques that you were born good at, and you inherited from our ancestors. And so the next thing to understand, if you're in phase 1 as well, is that because this is a bottom-up course, you need to understand how it fits into the build, get, and activate framework. And so BGA, build, get, and activate, is the basic way you can understand how all language acquisition works, except that in Mandarin Chinese, because of this logographic writing system, the build element is a lot longer than other languages. So what am I talking about? You need to build comprehension, build understanding. You need to get understandable messages, and then you need to activate what you understood. That is the key formula to fluency. Now, the key is step 2, get understandable messages. That's the key to all language acquisition. It's like you want to have nutrition go into your body, you eat food and put it into your digestive system. You want to have language emerge from your brain, you give it lots of understandable messages, and it naturally produces messages from there. The problem, though, is that on day 1, you don't understand anything. So therefore, you can't get any understandable messages at all. Like if you look at Chinese characters and you haven't learned any Chinese characters, it's just gibberish. There's no understanding whatsoever. So therefore, you have to spend time building understanding. And that is the process of learning how pronunciation works and learning individual characters, right? So it's like the most study of anything that we do. Of course, it's much more fun because we use mnemonics and it's interesting, comes from your life and all that. But it's closer to being like study because it's an actual fact that you're learning, that you're putting into a flashcard and you review, right? So you learn Chinese characters, and then you also learn consciously about the top 1,000 or so most frequent words. And you do that because once you get above 1,000 words, you can start to use the other language to learn words. So eventually you learn words through context. But on day 1, there's no context that you can use. So you learn about 1,000 words through building, understanding the build element of build, get, and activate. You learn 3,000 characters this way, and you learn how to pronounce the sounds of the language. That's what build comprehension, build understanding means. And when you build up enough characters, then you can put them together to create words, and you can put those words together to create sentences. Once you get to sentences, that's comprehensible input, and that means you start getting understandable messages. After you get enough understandable messages, the build get dance continues for a while. Eventually, you're ready to say stuff, and once you're ready to say stuff, that the process of activating is really just speaking to Chinese people, Chinese speakers, and having conversation, facing certain problems, and asking your brain to rise to the occasion to produce the language that it has understood for all this time. Actually, if you're doing this process right, the activate step is quite fun because it's like magic. You're like, I can't believe I was able to say that just now, but yeah, I have seen those words before, so I guess my brain was there. It was ready for me. We're pretty good at language, us human beings. So that's the basics of phase 1 characters and components. It covers levels 1 through 6, characters 1 through 46, and there's probably about maybe like 30 or so words that you learn from that, because you got to build up before you get a lot of words. Eventually the words surpass the characters by a lot, but not right at the beginning. So that's phase 1 characters and components. So we'll get into some questions about phase 1. So let's see what you guys are saying. Okay. Yeah, so Leanna says, with my limited time, I have been doing the Kickstarter instead of the Blueprint. I still get all the Traverse app. Yeah, so I mean, like, you get the Traverse app, you know, right, regardless of whether you do the Blueprint or Kickstarter. Now, obviously, you have to buy the Blueprint to get the Blueprint flashcards, but you get the Mandarin Speaking and Listening Kickstarter flashcards on Traverse, and you never have to pay for a subscription for Traverse to access the Mandarin Blueprint material. If you want to use Traverse for other material, then you could pay a subscription to Traverse to do that. But for the Mandarin Blueprint material, it's like free for the life of the product. So let's see here. What are your tips for a person who is going to learn Mandarin from scratch? Well, this is an onboarding for our members. So I'll just say this, Tiago, that we built these courses to help people who are learning Mandarin from scratch. I would go pronunciation / basic phrases. So that for us, that's the pronunciation mastery course and the Mandarin Speaking and Listening Kickstarter. And then from there, don't wait too long to get into learning characters, because in Chinese, there are not that many syllables. There aren't many syllables in the language. So therefore, avoiding learning characters leads to an automatic ceiling that you're going to hit with your fluency, because the sounds are going to be very similar to you. You're going to hear people saying different words and go like, that sounds just like another word I learned, but that wasn't the word they said. But if you know the individual characters, the characters look nothing alike. The characters are all visually distinct and beautiful. And so you don't want to wait too long for that. And the Mandarin Blueprint method and the Blueprint, if anybody here is in the Blueprint, you can explain to Tiago that it builds on itself. It builds naturally and methodically from scratch all the way to knowing 3,050 characters, having read, many thousands of comprehensible messages, and then you're ready to really immerse in the language, but also by then you're already probably at around B2 fluency. You can get your point across in many different instances, and once you get there, you're in a really great spot. So how many characters / words do we learn in phases 1 through 5 before continuing to the Mandarin Immersion Masterclass? Well, first of all, you don't have to do the Mandarin Immersion Masterclass after phase 5. There's no exact spot where you have to do Mandarin Immersion Masterclass. Immersion is something that's kind of always a part of your life in some sense. Maybe it's very little bit. Maybe it's just the immersion of the content that we do in the Mandarin Blueprint method. But the attitude that immersion should fit into my day in some sense should be a pillar of your Chinese study. So I have immersion playing in my house all the time. And it's because it's free, like it's free knowledge a lot of the time. It is coming out of my speakers, and I have it at any moment I can clock onto it and pick up some more language. But here's what I'll say though. The phases 1 through 5 covers 592 characters and about 1,000 words, just shy of 1,000 words. And that covers 80% of the language by frequency. So phases 1 through 5 is like the foundational course. Like we call it Fluency Foundations is phases 1 through 5, because when you get to that 80-20 point where you frequent 20% of the language that covers 80% of the cover, like covers 80% of it, that means that you're able to understand quite a lot. Now, understanding 80% is actually kind of annoying because you can't like imagine one out of every 5 words you don't know, but still the ability to pick up on a lot of graded content really picks up. And so, that's kind of what's going on there. Okay. We have a question here from Aaron Garcia. I have a 213-day streak of Mandarin Blueprint learning from scratch. If you're thinking about doing this, it's guaranteed to work. Well, glad to hear that, Aaron. You just have to put the work in with studying and flashcards. Right. Yeah, and I'm glad to hear that Paul is saying that the characters progress off each other. It's definitely what we're going for. So the idea is that every new thing we introduce, it either is related to something you've already learned or it's only one new thing, right? So, for example, if you could learn a new character that has, components that you've already learned. So the only thing you're learning there is that it's a new character with a different meaning, or you learn a new character because we introduce a brand new component you haven't seen before, but then the next 5 characters you learn all use that component. So it's usually we keep it close like that. And by the way, Aaron, well done on 213 days in a row. That's awesome. My question is there a way to jump to the sentences on Traverse and skip the characters in Traverse? So you can. So if you go on the flashcard level. I would do this on your desktop. It's a little bit easier to navigate on your desktop. But if you go to, let me just show you this. Well, I tell you what, Paula, I'm going to talk about that when we get to the phase 3 section, because we're still talking about phase 1 here and phase 2. So I don't want to get too ahead of myself here. So then, okay, next we have Dr. Jonathan Poussin. I've done the first 3 phases, but I am still lost. Should I start all over again because I can't even speak a little bit? Well, okay, so I'm going to keep going with the onboarding, Dr. Jonathan, but I want to get to that point because it's the phase 3. I wouldn't expect you to be able to be speaking by phase 3. I think that phase 3 is when you're first starting to get comprehensible input. So I don't know if you were here at the beginning of this, but I explained the difference between top-down learning and bottom-up learning. And the disadvantage of bottom-up learning is that it's not as immediate. The advantage is that if you do it right, you'll have fluency for life. But the disadvantage is that you have to do a long foundation building period, which is why the Speaking and Listening Kickstarter is something we made so that you can get some more quick wins. You can learn some of the top phrases that will get sort of burned into your brain. I want to talk more about this though in a little bit when we get to phase 3. So let's see here. Eric says, would it be good then to split my time every day in 3 portions, Blueprint, Immersion, MSLK? I think that's fine. I also think it's fine to completely do one and then do another one after that, and then do another one after that. It's really up to you. Whatever makes your study fun, whatever makes your study something that you're excited to go do every day. If having variability gets you excited about studying, then do that. If seeing more progress in one of the things that you're doing each day gets you excited, then do that. Like, for example, maybe you just really want to get to 3,000 characters. It's like, okay, then put blinders on and just get those 3,000 characters learned using the Henza movie method. But if you'd rather have a more eclectic approach, then do everything. It's really up to you in that sense. Anthony has a question about level 19. And let me just... okay, this is a specific enough question. I'll answer it here. I'm on level 19 and tend to write characters more than once when doing flashcards. Do you recommend continue to do this or just YOLO with one written character? I would say you don't have to write them multiple times unless you want to have good handwriting, which is... I don't have good handwriting. My handwriting looks like a child because I don't care that much about writing the Chinese characters. I want to be able to do it. Like, I want to know that I can do it. But I'm not like writing people letters. I'm typing, right? But if you can write, it shows that you have mastery of the components. So up to you. So let's see here. Yes, and yeah, Eric, if you did that, you would of course do traverse. Um, per flashcard, reviews are taking a bit, and I'm going slower than I would like. Right? I'm not sure. Let's see. When you're saying, are you adding on to your previous message saying with one written character per flashcard? I certainly don't think you need to write them over and over. You can just, I mean, I even would write them on my hand with my finger sometimes, so whatever you feel is the most efficient thing that reminds you of your scene. If you forgot your scene, but you can still write the character correctly, that's fine too. And then once you've done that, you've successfully recalled the fact. And that's what SRS is for. SRS is for recalling the fact from your unconscious mind and then putting it back into your conscious mind so that it strengthens the memory. And then you can have a longer interval before you need to see it again. And then eventually you start reading. And when you start reading, you're getting constant reminders all the time. And it becomes sort of a natural SRS. Zhen is the answer to, can you say Zhen? As an English speaker, can you hear when Chinese people say R in a different way? Sure. I mean, because the R is different in Chinese. So the R is with the tongue pulled back up. So we just say ren, like r, r, r. But with the Chinese, they put their tongue up and there is this vibration that happens between the tip of your tongue and the roof of your mouth. Zhen, zhen. So there's a right? And this is most obvious in the character which just means like day and or date. And that is, it's probably the hardest individual initial sound to get down. Just keep working on your retroflex initials. This isn't a lesson on pronunciation, so I'm not going to go too deep into this, but keep working on your retroflex initials and the R will get easier. And, watch our pronunciation mastery videos on the problem initial R. I bought the blueprint. Is the Kickstarter a separate product? Yes, it is. Yes, adding on. Right. Say, though, by phase 3, I've been able to order food in restaurants, understand what is on the menu, and respond to the waiter to some degree. Thank you, Mandarin Blueprint. Hey, that's awesome. I'm glad to hear that. I mean, obviously, everybody's a little bit different. I look at phase 3 as like when you're first starting to get comprehensible inputs. I don't think it's very likely that you'll be able to have lots of conversations by then because you also aren't even to 80% of the language by frequency at that point. So, I sort of see that as still being a part of the silent period. But if you're doing that well, then, well done, Paula. Obviously, you're probably doing more than just that. But yeah. So Dr. Poussin, I will get to your questions about being lost in phase 3, but I will get to that when we cover phase 3 in a little bit. So let's continue, and then I'll get back to the chat after we talk about phase 2. So let's go to phase 2. And again, phase 2 is the second part of the blueprint. The blueprint is phases 1 through 5, intermediate, upper intermediate, advanced, and then habit building bootcamp, Mandarin immersion masterclass. And today we're not going to cover pronunciation mastery, habit building bootcamp, Mandarin immersion masterclass, and pronunciation practice toolkit because last time I did one of these, it took about 3 hours. So it was just too long. But what I'll do is I'll mix it up each week. So each week we'll have an onboarding live stream and we'll talk about those next time. So let's get into phase 2, which is the vocabulary section of the course. And so I mentioned before that if you're going to learn vocabulary, at the beginning, you can't learn it in context yet. You need to learn it by applying particular effort to learning the highest frequency words. You want to pick the highest frequency words and understand how Chinese words work and how to use the living links technique when you're in phase 2. So phase 1 was the Henza movie method. By the end of phase 1, you pretty much get how that works. And so you'll continue to do it as you go through phase 2. However, the focus in phase 2 is about understanding the structure of Chinese words. There are 7 basic compound word types. And if you understand that pattern, you'll see it all over the place. It's actually a very simple language. And then when you get the fact that words are already easy to learn if you know the characters. That's one. But then you can just apply some very simple mnemonics. They're not as complicated as the Henza movie method. It's not as structured, but you can apply some simple mnemonics to words, and that will make it even easier to remember. And then all of them have flashcards. We recommend using images in the flashcards because that really helps you associate directly a visual image and a Chinese word. So it takes the English out of it. You're just like, 照相机, and you just see the camera and you go, that is called a 照相机, right? So like the point is that when you're learning a vocabulary word at this stage, you have to apply a little bit of extra technique, and then later you can learn vocabulary words directly through context, because that's how we acquire all new words in any language. So you just see it in the context of a full story that you understand everything else, and it's easy. So, all right. Now, at this point, the Henza movie method is getting easier, and there are some additional longer lessons to help solidify your memory when it comes to vocabulary. So we have this, these lessons called the Logic of Living Links. They're at the beginning of levels 7 through 10, respectively, parts 1 through 4. And they go through all that we understand about how you can quickly try to remember a word by making associations to your own lived experience. So think of it like the methods you need to like Google search your own history to find the connection that will make the new Chinese fact easier to learn because it's connected to something you already know. It's almost like little neuron welding that you're doing. You have a series of neurons somewhere in your head that is associated with a concept that is sort of the raw concept that you have an English word for, but the visualization of that concept, you just need to apply it to the Chinese word there. And so it's techniques to do that. And it is the final phase of the course that is purely a build comprehension course. So build, get, and activate. Building comprehension is learning pronunciation, individual Chinese characters, and the top 1,000 vocabulary words. So those three things do not make you fluent in and of themselves. This is my point earlier about why phase 3 is a bit early to expect to be able to communicate fluently with people, because you're only just getting comprehensible input for the first time, and you haven't built, and you're still building comprehension. So as you go into phase 3 after this, you end up for the first time doing a mixture of building comprehension and getting understandable messages, but it's still very much like tilted towards building comprehension, because you have to build the comprehension of, these many characters in Chinese and understand how the words work, so that when you see phrases, sentences, paragraphs, stories, all the various things of a TV show, you listen to a podcast, you actually understand it. And so phase 1 and phase 2 are purely for building understanding. And that means that, that's the part of the course that is, it's almost like preparation for acquiring Chinese. But here's the thing. This used to take like 500 hours for people. And now you can do it in about 12 to 13 hours. The Mandarin Blueprint Challenge, which we give people all the time, people finish it frequently, and many of them finish it in just 15 days. And that they're actually reading Chinese sentences in 15 days. And so it's absolutely possible to get through this phase of the language acquisition process in you'll look back on it and go, that was such a short amount of time. When you're in it, it can feel like it's a lot, but then, I always look back at things that I thought were going to take forever with Chinese, and I go like, oh yeah, I just kept working on it every day a little bit, and then next thing you know, it doesn't feel like a long time looking back on it. It felt like a long time while I was experiencing it, but looking back on it, I'm like, well, it got me here, so now I can speak Chinese. Okay, let's go back and see if there are any questions about phase 2. All right. Okay, so Aaron, your point here was about how flashcard, or like you were saying that reviews are taking a bit and I'm slower than I would like, right? So are you just referring specifically to character reviews, or are you also referring to like your sentence reviews as well? I can tell you this, if sentence reviews are taking up a lot of your time, I'm going to bring this up in the next section, but it's just very important to remember that sentences, like no one sentence is essential, and no one thing that you come across in anything in phases 3 through 5 and most of the intermediate course, you're going to see so many times more later in the course that it's genuinely no big deal if you're not into it at the early part of the course. You know, it's just one of those things where it feels like you have to master it in that moment, and that's that school mindset sticking in. But if you're standing where I'm standing, I'm going like, oh, you're struggling with this word right now, and you know, you hypothetical Chinese student thinks that this is so important that you get this right now, but I know that you're going to see this word literally like 300 more times before the end of the course. If you don't get it right now, it's no big deal. Like whatever, just, you'll get it. There's no doubt. Just keep walking the path. And so there's I get it. It's totally a thing that feels like you want to do it and you want to be the completionist. But my feeling with sentences is that it's more important to protect your enjoyment of study than it is to master everything and get bored, right? Because if you don't like a sentence for any reason, you know, I don't like the sentence's face, it's got a gross face, then just suspend it. Don't put it, remove it from your review queue, or you can do this technique of sending it to the future. But let me get to that when I cover phase 3, because that's when we're talking about sentences. Suzanne says, I'm a fan of yours. I don't know since when. I'm from Germany, so I have to translate from English to German to Mandarin, but I like it very much. It's so great to listen to you. Well, welcome, Suzanne. And also, hello to a fellow, I'm kind of a German. A lot of my ancestry is from Germany and Ireland, and a little bit of England. So as a lot of us Americans, our ancestry is a bit of a mutt. But yeah, so welcome. Okay, let's move on to phase 3, because phase 3 is where a lot of people have questions. So that's a good place to go. Okay. So into phase 3. So again, if you're learning Mandarin, again, this was the order that we built the courses. Pronunciation is important to get early. Also, speaking and listening is important to get early. And I explained, if you missed it, I explained at the beginning the logic of why we waited to do this until later. So if you're curious, you can go back in the replay. But then you get into character learning, vocabulary learning, and when you enter phase 3, this is a major milestone. This is the point where there's enough characters and enough words that you're able to read real sentences. And so getting used to this it's definitely like, it's a big lift, because you're reading sentences in a hieroglyphic language. You know, these are just a bunch of logographs. And the fact that you can do it at all is worth, like, you know, having a big celebration about. And people do get very excited in the level 13 lesson, Time to Get Real About sentences. But, and this is really important, you must learn to abandon perfectionism at this point, because you're now entering the long period of playing the noticing, understanding game, okay? Because noticing what you can, understanding what you can, should be approached as a game that doesn't have anybody ruling it except for your own brain. And so when you don't understand something, a lot of people have the psychological kind of reaction to that of being like, I don't understand. I should understand. You know, like I wish I was, you know, able to understand this as well as my native language. And it's only natural, because when you learn a new language, you feel like a kid again. You're back to that feeling of like, more things are happening than I can comprehend, and it's very uncomfortable. But that's where you need to have your like adult mind come in and be like, hey, just reframe this. What we're just doing is playing a game called, oh, I know that word. Oh yeah, I know that character. Oh, I know that tone. Yeah, listening to that person, that was a tone pair I recognize. That's cool. I used to never know any of this. I know that component. I know that character. I know this. Oh, look at that sentence structure. I've seen that before. And if you have that attitude about it, then suddenly the change becomes, you adopt an attitude that is much more friendly towards yourself and the language. And you recognize the truth that is that, there is only one path to fluency, and that is understanding. And you have gotten to understanding messages faster than was ever possible before Mandarin Blueprint. This is genuinely like, if I had to like hone in on what is the single best thing about Mandarin Blueprint, it's that we get you to comprehensible input through reading actual Chinese faster than was ever possible before, because other programs don't have a fully integrated set that you have from character components that lead into characters. Those characters logically lead into words by using similar character components. Those words logically lead into sentences by using similar characters. And those sentences logically lead into paragraphs by using similar words. And everything that you're learning is only based on what you had already learned previously. And because other programs are not integrated, or if they are integrated, they have terrible character learning techniques, you have to go through this long period before you can understand anything, because you can't find stuff that's tailored to your level. It's just impossible. Nobody knows what you've learned. We know what you've learned because we built the whole curriculum. So that said, though, in phase 3, it's just like you're going to start seeing sentences. You're going to start seeing things that, even though you know all the characters, you're still struggling to kind of understand how it means what it means. And so this is what I mean about how you got to learn to abandon perfectionism, because everything is going to come up again and again and again and again and again. So if you didn't get something, it's genuinely no big deal. And it's so important not to get hung up on things that you don't know, because like I said, I'm standing over here, I'm saying, I know what this sentence structure is that you're getting hung up on right now. And I know that it's literally coming up 1,000 more times ahead of you. So if you didn't get it today, it could just be because like you didn't have your morning coffee or something, like, and just tomorrow it'll make perfect sense. So there's a letting go that comes from, I don't care if I don't understand. I'm just happy if I do understand. I don't care if I don't understand. I'm happy if I do understand. That will make the whole process much smoother. And also, there's a fundamental difference between character and vocabulary flashcards compared to sentence flashcards. Every character you need to learn, you got to do the flashcard. Don't suspend the flashcard. Don't remove the flashcard, because the characters are essential pieces of the language. Sentences, there's no individual sentence that is absolutely essential, because there's infinite ways to say the same thing and get your point across. And so if for any reason you don't like a sentence, you can just remove it from your reviews, or you can send it to the future. So what I mean by send it to the future is, in Traverse, you have options to, you have the option to click easy. And I know that it's not easy. You actually don't understand. But if you hit easy, it makes the interval much longer, so that when you arrive at it again, you arrive at that same sentence again, you'll know more Chinese. Because if you keep getting better every day, then today you don't feel like you understand it. But if you send it to the future, you send it to 2 weeks from now, over that 2-week period, you're learning more characters. You're learning more words. You're reading more sentences. You're getting more comprehensible input. And then it comes back 2 weeks later and you go, oh yeah, now I get it. Happens all the time. So sentence flashcards are, it's funny because from the large scale, you must get lots of sentences. So they're essential in the sense that you get messages, but any individual one doesn't matter at all. And so it's kind of this weird sort of contradiction. The main thing is just that you need to have a lot of them, but just do the ones that resonate with you. And as you get better, more and more sentences will resonate with you. So that's a pretty important element there. Now, one of the things I want to do here is, we had a question about Traverse functionality. So I'm going to just switch over to showing the Traverse platform here for a second, so that I can show you how you might be able to get right to the sentences. So as a reminder, what we had from Paula, I believe it was from Paula. My question is there a way to jump to the sentences on Traverse and skip the characters in Traverse? Yeah, so here's what you would do for that. So let me just switch to here. Okay, great. Yeah, so then we have the Traverse platform. Okay. So if you were to go to I'll pick a phase 3 deck. So let's look at phase 3. Let's pick level 15. Okay. So, and I do think that it's a little bit easier. Oh, I'm zoomed in. No wonder. I do think it's a little bit easier to do this on the desktop because you have more room to look at the mind map here. So let me just go here. So if you go down, you can see that this is the first half of the level that has just the characters and the words and all of that. But when you get down to the bottom here, you'll see that we have the level 15 Judes, right? So if you go here, now you have all of the lessons from the, or all of the sentences from each of the lessons. So these sentences at the very beginning correspond to the words that you learn up here. So like the first word is menkal. So therefore the first sentences are associated with that. Menkal, right? And so you go down here, and again, when you're in this section of you're doing your reviews, and of course you're learning it on the course platform first, and then you're adding them to your reviews on Traverse. Didn't mean to zoom in, but now you can really see. There are any questions about phase 3? So let's go ahead and move the chat up in here. Okay. Phase 3 must then be the most frustrating because when starting phase 3, there will be way more stuff we do not know compared to the amount of words, characters that we already know. I just think that the beginning of each phase, the thing that you're focusing on is at that moment, it's the hardest it will ever be. So in phase 3 at level 13, it's the first time ever you're reading sentences made up of just Chinese squiggles, right? Like they're just, before you started Mandarin Blueprint, they were just a bunch of flat squiggles on the page. And so then you move on to the phase 4. You've done 4 levels, or sorry, no, you've done 7 levels. And now you're starting to read short stories. And so individual sentences are fine, but then the short stories are kind of hard. So you have to like put more effort into the thing that is new. And it's the hardest it will ever be at the beginning. And this is just naturally true with any new skill. And then eventually you build up the meta understanding of how Chinese sentences tend to be structured. You start to notice the patterns, and then reading a new sentence becomes much easier. But at the beginning, you have no reference. So it's like you're just sort of getting the hang of it at that point. So yeah, phase 3 definitely has, it's pretty tough, but it's also not, it's the hardest it will ever be at the beginning, and then it gets easier. Okay. Paula says, with sentences, sometimes the characters seem to run into each other, that it takes a few flashcard repeats before the meaning of the sentence sinks in. Is that normal? Absolutely. So, and by the way, I just want to, when you're saying sometimes the characters seem to run into each other, what you're saying there, you're not saying that like literally the typography, like they're covering each other, right? You're not saying that there's some kind of like typing error in it that's happening. I think what you're just saying is intellectually they're kind of running into each other, right? And the thing about that is that I think that you don't have to overwhelm yourself with sentences in the early days if you don't want to. You can just try to understand a few, and you can have a different pace for how quickly you're learning characters and words versus how quickly you're learning sentences. Also bearing in mind that, learning sentences is not, you're not really learning sentences. You're just trying to understand them. And if you didn't understand a sentence, it's really no big deal. It's just, oh, I didn't understand that one, move on. Because it's a natural instinct that people have to be like, I didn't understand this, let me investigate why. And that, I think, is actually a mistake. Because if you investigate why you didn't understand, that is essentially holding you back from trying to understand the next 10 sentences. So, if you, in an hour, let's say in an hour, you can learn 100, or you can read 100 sentences. And there are about 20% of them that you don't know, right? But so here's one technique. If you didn't understand something, you just keep going. That means that in an hour, you can understand 80 messages, right? But if you stop every time you don't understand a sentence until you get it, the amount of time it takes you to look up the words or like look up the grammar point is far longer than would be than it would be if you just moved on. And so even if you understood everything, you'd only understand about 40 messages by the end. And so who had the better study session? The person who just moved on or the person who kept looking things up? And the answer is, like, objectively, it's the person who got more understandable messages, because that's the only thing that makes you fluent. Understanding the most messages possible in an hour, your understandable messages per minute, is the key metric to language acquisition. So now, by the way, I'm not saying never satisfy your curiosity. If you feel like I want to know what that word is and you want to look it up in the dictionary, totally go for it, but in a playful, fun way. Don't think you have to, right? If that makes sense. Okay. Can confirm the coolest feeling is reading a new sentence when adding it to reviews and being able to understand it on the first shot. It's such a great feeling. Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely true. I'm a fan of moving on. Thanks for the tip. Sometimes during flashcard reviews, I want to switch it by practicing sentences first before the character review. I mean, the thing about that is that, like, it's tricky to learn the sentences before you've seen the characters. And maybe it's like a preview. You can kind of preview, oh, how might I use this character? I guess that's okay. But if you don't know the character yet, you don't know how it's pronounced yet. So it's like the sentence is definitely going to be harder. So yeah. Logan says hello from level 14. You just ended up answering the only question I had. So I will just say I've been loving the course and truly appreciate what you and your team have created. Well, I'm glad that I answered the question. You're confirming that this onboarding live stream each week is a good idea. So I'm going to keep doing it. Yes, intellectually they run into each other. That the light bulb on grouping upon initial reading does not light up. That it indicates words and not an initial character. Yeah, I gotcha. Yeah, no, that happens. So what you're saying is that as there are moments where you don't realize the border between words. And by the way, I wondered about this. Did anybody else wonder about this when they were a kid? Like you'd be in Chinatown or something, and you'd see or a Chinese restaurant, and you'd see all those characters, and you'd think, how do they don't have any spaces? How do they know? And like it took me a while, and now I get it. Like now, I never have a problem with it. Actually, still to this day, there's a thing that can happen where it happens to be that the border between a word and the next word happens to be another word. And so occasionally you can like quickly misinterpret it for a second, but eventually the grammar patterns and the word structures and, all of that stuff, it just, the patterns become so common that you recognize them immediately. And actually I've become faster at reading Chinese and English, which is kind of embarrassing, but it's true. Let's see here. Will we eventually learn every character in every sentence we see in the flashcards? Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I'm trying to think if there are any examples of a character that we call a top-down word. So what Paul is referring to there is a top-down word, and you haven't gotten to it yet in the character order. But if we just tell you what it is, say, hey, there's one word in this sentence that you haven't learned yet. We're going to define it, and we're going to, give you the opinion for it. That's a top-down word. Right? So we talked about the concept of top down, bottom up. A top down word is just, that's what that is. So I can't think of a top down word we put in except for maybe a character that comes from a place name, like something like that. And if that's the case, then for sure we could be talking about a character that isn't in the order, but it's very, very rare, if at all. Okay. Hi, YouTube. What I mean by switching between sentences and characters is that on my deck, yesterday I did characters, then sentences. Maybe today I want to do sentences and characters. Oh, I see. You're talking about the reviewing part of it. The reviewing part. Right. So, Paula, I know that there is an answer to this, and I can't remember what it is. I know that Dominic knows. So if you want to send him a message, Dominic is the founder of Traverse. Dom@traverse.link. I'm not going to I'll just do it like this. Dom@traverse.link. You can interpret that as an email address. He will tell you how to do that. I think there is a way. I don't have it offhand, the memory of how to do that. I'm pretty sure there is a way to do that. So if you get in touch with him, he'll be able to tell you. All right. You guys are getting into Lord of the Rings jokes here, which I love. So, yeah, manage my flashcards, scroll up, card types. Yeah, I love that. Thanks, Aaron. All right, cool. And now, Dr. Poussin, you were saying, I've done the first 3 phases, but I'm still lost. Should I start all over because I can't even speak a little bit? So I want to just know, and you can let me know if the reason that you're lost is because you were expecting to be able to speak, or if the reason that you're lost is that you're not sure what to do next. If you were expecting to be able to speak at this point, I would say that you're kind of jumping the gun a little bit. I would say that expecting to be able to start having conversations should be something you should look at after phase 5 and starting to get into some actual immersion. And so my question to you is just like, is that the issue, or is there something that you're technically not sure about what to do? If the answer is that if it's the latter and you're not sure about what to do, I'd be happy to help. If it's just that you thought you'd be able to speak by now, I mean, if you want to get to speaking faster, the Mandarin Speaking and Listening Kickstarter is a great way to at least get down 1,000 basic phrases, and that would be very helpful. Eric says, a general question about Traverse. Are we supposed to add characters and sentences ourselves, or are they all preloaded in Traverse? So like all the characters and sentences that are a part of the Mandarin Blueprint method are in Traverse, and you just have to add them to your review queue as a part of the learn mode. So when you are in Traverse, and this is explained in the Traverse tutorials, so you can check that out, like where I have like screen shares and whatever. But the basic thing to understand is that the first thing you do is you add cards to your review based on what you learned today. And it has to be like that, because otherwise, if we just said add 10 cards a day, it's like, well, what if you didn't have time to do 10 things today? You only had time to do 5. It has to be totally customizable. I'm only going to add the cards that I actually did today. That's like the learn or add mode. But then once you've added them, then they're in your review queue. Like, and it's literally just a matter of pressing a button in the case of the characters. And in the case of word connection cards, you add an image to the card. And you can add notes if you want, but it's like, it's kind of the adding cards mode versus the reviewing cards mode. And if you're doing it the way I suggest in the beginning of the course, it's you have the course platform up on your computer screen, and you have the Traverse app open, and then you just you go through and add cards as you're doing it. Dr. Poussin says, I feel that I'm not retaining the information enough. I took a 3-month break and I want to start again. Right. So this is a good, so if you took a break, there's a Loom video I made that explains exactly what to do here. So let me just find that real quick so I can tell you, so that you can check that out. Because basically this question comes up a lot. Like, what if life got in the way and, I missed some time? How should I approach getting back? And so I explain how to do that. Hold on a second. FAQ, life got in the way. Yeah, here we go. So this is a Loom I recorded about that. Let me just pop that in the chat, and you can check that out for Dr. Poussin. Okay. A lot of native Chinese people say I sound like a native, but I am from Nigeria, and they say my Chinese is good, but I change my accents depending on the language. And I think because of this, I am not able to remember Chinese characters clearly, and I am only able to speak English and Chinese. Well, I think that the character learning technique that we teach here at Mandarin Blueprint allows you to utilize memory techniques to remember the characters. And it doesn't really, in theory, you could actually learn all the characters without having to speak at all. So I wouldn't have that self-limiting belief there. I think you could totally do it. Right. And so, yeah, I mean, so Dr. Poussin, if you want to add a little context here, did you feel like you were not remembering the characters, or you were just not getting the sentences down? maybe you felt like you were supposed to be memorizing the sentences. That's the thing that happens to a lot of people. You don't have to memorize the sentences. You just want to try to play the understanding game. It's just like, you've been watching the whole stream. You understand what I mean by the understanding game. You just want to say, do I understand this word? Do I understand this sentence? Is there something I can get out of it? If I did understand, you have added a brick to your castle called Mandarin fluency, but you're still in the early stages. So like, it's not formed yet into something that can be sort of a conversation. And so if you're talking about grammar and sentences and like quote unquote, remembering them, the process of acquiring language through understandable messages is very unconscious. And I would say that in phase 3, it's too early to say it hasn't worked. You have to keep going and get more comprehensible input, get more messages, maybe do more immersion, maybe take the Mandarin Speaking Listening Kickstarter so that you can listen to the immersion materials there. There are the sentence packs that come at the end of each level. So in the blueprint, so for example, from levels 13 through 20, in every level review, we have a zip file that has all of the sentence audio. Have that on in the background. Get more of it into your ears so that you can keep letting those messages come. And you say, I learned about 450 characters, but I forgot about half of them during this break because I was not understanding the material. Right. Okay. And so, yeah. Let's see here. Yeah, I mean, when you're saying not understanding the material, I think you're saying you didn't understand the sentences and all of that. And so, I think that the key there is just to not get as caught up if you don't understand a sentence. It's really no big deal. Like I think somebody up there said, I'm a fan of moving on. That's fine. Just go, okay, I didn't get it. Move on to the next sentence. And if you get that one, then that one worked. And eventually you're going to see all this stuff over and over again. So you'll have a chance to keep improving. All right. Yeah, the other language accents are natural, and I try to force my brain to remember, but I fail. So I think that if you do the Henza movie method, you'll remember the characters. Hi, I'm new to the course, and I'm at level 6. I'm about to begin phase 2. What would be a good timeline to get to the Mandarin Blueprint intermediate level? I'm not sure how long it will take. I would say that the first 5 phases takes... I have this data somewhere. We calculated it all out before. But I don't know if I have it on hand. I think it's probably on another computer, but I can tell you this, our estimate for how long it takes to get through, the blueprint in general is between, 800 and 1400 hours. And the reason there's such a variation there is that there is an element of, intelligence that comes into this. Like while it is true that anybody can acquire language, I mean, certainly anybody here that's listening to me and understanding me can acquire language, but like there is an aptitude. Some people have a knack for things and some people don't have as much, but anybody can do it. Like I don't want to discourage anybody, but that's why we have to have a kind of wide range. And the foundation course is the first 36 levels. It's the first 592 characters and 1,000 words. So I'm thinking we're probably looking there, but also during that time, you can't move as fast because you're learning for the first time how to do everything. So even though it's less overall material, because you're learning how to learn characters, you're learning how to learn words, you're seeing sentences for the first time, you're seeing paragraphs for the first time, it therefore takes longer per step. And so it's definitely worth getting through. But I would say you're probably looking at somewhere between 350 to 500 hours to get through phase 5 and get to the intermediate course. Do you have any videos on how to pronounce SH and X like sheng and xiang? I really don't know how to make them sound different or correct. Absolutely, we do. There's a great pronunciation video on our channel that's all about everything about Mandarin pronunciation on our YouTube channel. So if you look at our long form videos, I think it's the one that has the most views, actually. It's a very popular video, and we go over all of that. So yeah, you can definitely find that there. Okay, follow-up question. I would like to do the HSK tests as I go through the Mandarin Blueprint. How do the phases relate to the HSKs 1 through 6? By the end of the upper intermediate course, which is 2,000 characters and about 6,600 words or so, that covers all the material through the HSK 6. So, and the end of the intermediate course is through the HSK 3, which goes to show there is like a compounding effect. Once you get to a certain point, then you can get through a new HSK level much faster. I'm not a huge fan of the HSK cards on the table. I don't think it's a very, like, I don't like it as a test overall, but, you know, it's very, like that. We cover everything, you know, so yeah. Just putting my 2 cents in. Remembering characters got better as I progressed. Like I said previously, the next one is tied to the previous, so just trust the process. It works. Nice, nice. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do, guys. Once again, I love this onboarding live stream, but it's more time consuming than I expected it to be each time. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go through the next few courses, and then I'll do a longer Q&A to make sure that we cover any questions that may have come up. But I need to kind of move a little bit more quickly because I got some meetings I got to do a little bit later. So bear with me, guys. So let's keep going here. All right. So phase 3, sentences. You've learned characters, you've learned character components, you've learned vocabulary, and then in phase 3 you start to see some simple sentences. In phase 4 you start to put those sentences into dialogues, opinions, short stories, and just the graded content, stuff that is longer than just a sentence. So the biggest challenge is definitely reading your first paragraphs and following the grammar at a higher level, right? So sentences start to get easier in phase 4. Words and characters get faster to acquire because, like I mentioned, you know, at the beginning of phase 1, learning a character is really hard. At the beginning of phase 2, it's easier. By phase 3, it's even easier. And by phase 4, it's like learning a character starts to feel really easy. So, because everything gets old hat after enough repetition. So the hardest thing in phase 4 is definitely getting the paragraphs. Now, I mentioned earlier, you have to be willing to skip things you don't understand because they'll still be there later. The thing about everything in phases 3 through 5, which is still the foundation building period, is that it's only natural that there will be some things that don't click because it's all new, right? And so everything it doesn't go away, right? So if you want to go back to it, you can always go back to it. And it's always linked in the sidebar of the desktop version of the course. All of the graded content, all of the graded readers. So if you're reading through one, you're like, boy, this is a little bit tough right now. Skip it. It's fine. But download the audio and put it on your immersion playlist. I can't emphasize that enough, guys. Please have your immersion playlist and keep it active. You know, it's one of those things that it's weird because it's so easy to do and it has such a high return, but a lot of people don't do it. And I'm like, this is the most passive thing you can do. All you got to do is do a little bit of admin work, move a couple of files and open up in your media player and just put it on repeat. And then just keep adding files to it as you go through. And by doing that, you're making sure that everything you learn keeps coming into your ears at some point. And of course, you don't have to pay that much attention to it. You can turn it down to volume level 1 if it gets annoying, but it's the kind of thing where it's such a low cost in terms of time and such a high reward. So, you know, definitely do that. Now, I will say that during phase 4 and phase 5, you're not really at the point where you can get to 98% comprehension because it's just too early. You don't know enough characters yet. So in order to tell a short story in phases 4 and 5, you have to be able to have a few more top-down words. So it's closer to like 90% comprehension. And so it's totally reasonable to say 90% comprehension is pretty good, but there's a lot of top-down words, and I keep having to look over to see what the top-down word means, and I keep moving between, you know, the story and the top-down word. If that's how you feel about it, totally fine. Just go back to it later, because the further you get into the course, the more of those words that are top down will become no longer top down. And then you'll be able to understand them from there. So as you go through phase 4, you start to get more and more. I forgot to mention this point. You want to be aware of flashcard fatigue. So this is the situation where your sentence flashcards start to build up. And if you remember, sentences don't matter. Like, it matters that you get them, but no individual one matters. So if you find yourself starting to dislike the sentence part of the flashcard process, then just start removing the ones that you don't like. It's easy to, in Traverse, it's very easy to just say, remove this flashcard from my queue. Just don't show me this flashcard anymore. And so I would do that so that you protect your enjoyment of your study. And also remember, the better you get, the less you need to have flashcard sentences. Flashcard sentences are fine. They're a good thing to do for a period, but eventually you want to just be reading. You want to just be reading stuff. And so you're not quite ready for that at phase 4, so you should keep doing the flashcard reviews, but it's like, really the flashcards are best for the characters and the high frequency words. That's where they're best. That's where they're the most leverage that you can get out of a flashcard. But with the sentences, it's more about just like making sure you have a routine of reading every day. And if you can switch that routine from flashcards to actual content, then I think that's better. I think that's better than doing a bunch of flashcards. So just beware of flashcard fatigue. Look out for that. So as you go through phase 4, get more and more sentences. I'm going to keep moving on just because we have to get through more here. Also, I kind of, well, calls of nature are happening here, but I can hold it. So phase 5 stories, this is where we get into like fairy tales. So like Three Little Pigs, the Sleeping Beauty, Nighttime Beauty, Daytime Witch, which is a Chinese fairy tale. Cao Chong Cheng Xiang, which is Cao Chong weighs the elephant. There's a Sima Guang Za Gang, which is Sima Guang smashes the vat. These are a couple of Chinese fairy tales. There's the one called Patience, Nai Xin. That's a really beautiful Taoist fairy tale. These fairy tales are longer. There's several paragraphs, and so it's just continuing to get your context to expand, because the context of a sentence is fine for understanding a basic grammar point, but it's not good for understanding, for acquiring language faster, because the more context you have, the easier it is to acquire a word, right? Because if you see a word in the context of an entire book, that word's going to make sense to you. If you see it in the context of like a 5-character sentence and the word is 2 characters, it's not enough, right? So you need longer and longer context, and that's what phase 5 gets you to. And it is the foundation defining course. By the end of phase 5, you know 80% of the language by frequency, and so that makes a big difference in how much you can understand. So the biggest challenge is definitely reading the longer form stories. In this course, or in this phase, you unlock paragraphs that lead to full stories. So in phase 4, you're unlocking sentences that lead to a paragraph. Here, you're unlocking paragraphs that lead to full stories. And really, if you follow the plot, it's components unlock characters, characters unlock words, words unlock sentences, sentences unlock paragraphs, paragraphs unlock stories. So you go through the entire process from a single horizontal line in lesson 1 all the way to full stories by the end of phase 5. And it doesn't end there, but it's a really quite a remarkable accomplishment. And like I mentioned in the phase 4 bit, you only know about 90% comprehension at this point. So you're not really at the point yet where you can read these with real extensiveness, like where you're like, oh, this is a breeze. It's still sort of intensive, so therefore take your time, and remember that you will see them again in the intermediate course and beyond, because the way, I'm going to mention that in a second. So you keep up with all the techniques of phases 1 through 4, and then you will see all of these stories again when you get to 98% comprehension. That is a big milestone, because 98% comprehension is what it classifies as extensive reading. Extensive reading is where you understand enough that it is not intensive to read. You can actually enjoy it and just take in the new material. And it's one of the best ways to acquire language. And so you want your graded readers to be there. Like I mentioned before, it's hard to do that before you get to 98% before you get to 80% of the language by frequency. So in the intermediate course, it's much more like that. And then we also reintroduce these stories when you get to the point where you know 98% of the characters. And so just like I was saying before, it's never that big of a deal to just go, not quite ready for this yet. I'll just put it off until later, because you will see it again. So here's what I'm going to have to do, guys. I'm kind of running out of time here because I have sort of some hard stops that are coming up, because I always want to make sure that you guys get the answers you need about these different courses. But I just need to allot more time for the onboarding, or at least break it up a little bit more. I actually think that going over phases 1 through 5 is a really good individual stream, and then going over some other ones is a good stream, and not trying to put it all together like this, because by putting it all together like this, I can't cover all of it as well as I would like to with the time constraint. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to open it up for general questions. If you have questions about any of the other courses, I'll be happy to answer them. But I'm not going to do like an overview of anything else because I'm kind of out of time here. So what I'll do is I'll just switch to the question portion that I had planned here, and I'll pull up the chat again, and we'll see if there are any other questions that have come up and go from there. Okay. Nice. Excited to work the process. Christine says, thanks, Phil. This helps to get a better feel for the process. That's awesome. We can wait till the next live YouTube. Thank you, Eric. Appreciate that. Agreed. Phase 1 through 5 is helpful. Yeah. I mean, I do want to do an intermediate. Like, I love talking about all of the phases. It's very important. But yeah, sure. No problem, Aaron. I'll be happy to answer that. I love talking about everything in the course. I just, it's just a matter of like, it's been a wild week here at Mandarin Blueprint for good reasons, but it's just, we've had to take on a lot of meetings, a lot of things that we got to get done. So, I'm just sort of feeling the pressure of that. So, I have one last question. If you have some time, is there a way to pay you for 1 hour of your time for a personalized consultation on your progress so far? We're building a course. I'm going to do this weekly, John. And it'll always be Wednesdays at 1 p.m. Central. That's my plan. So although I say that, next week I'm on holiday. My mother-in-law is coming into town. So, and then the week after that, we'll figure it out. Luke might come in and do it, and it might be a different time. But yeah, anyway, so sorry, going back to Aaron's question. So here's the thing. At the moment, we don't really have a mechanism in place for that, but we are going to build this thing we're going to call the Mandarin Blueprint Accelerator. And it's going to be built like I'm getting inside baseball here for some of you guys, because this is not something like the Phrase Vault is a course that we are going to come out with relatively soon. The Accelerator is a little bit, we're hoping for end of Q4 to have that done. But what it's going to be is everybody's going to have somebody assigned to them that's keeping up with them and seeing how their progress is. Kind of like the Mandarin Blueprint method, if you follow it, is like the best map ever. And so you can follow that map and you'll do super well. But if you want somebody kind of like alongside you the whole time and being like, how did you feel about that? What about this? Have you considered this? And like just helping you the whole way. That's essentially what the accelerator is going to be. And obviously it's going to be a premium product, because it's essentially going to be somebody assigned to you to be like, hey, I'm here, I'm your liaison, right? But that's kind of what we have going on there. As for like the personal time, I mean, it's one of those things where like I'm trying to do these live streams to help people out with stuff like this, so I can reach a lot of people. And so, you can email us about it, I guess, but I think that I'm probably going to pass on that right now, because I have so many things we got to do. So yeah. Okay. So yes, the accelerator program, we're working on it. I would, it's something we would love to do soon. Okay, Paula says, happy to hear what you said about what is possible after Phase 5. I love Harry Potter, and I'm looking forward to read the novels in Mandarin. Yeah, well, I'll make one point about that. Stephen Krashen, the famous linguist, said that he loves Star Trek. And so he always finds the Star Trek books and, whatever written material, and if there's a dubbed TV show, he always finds that. And he says, I don't even mind if I'm at 60% comprehension of Star Trek, because I love the content. I love the content in its purest form is so compelling to me that I'll gladly suffer incomprehension because the content is so good. And for a lot of people, Harry Potter, I read Harry Potter as a kid. So reading it in adulthood in Chinese has this, dare I say, magical quality to it, because you're reading it and you're like, wow, I'm connecting to this thing that the raw images of how I imagined, Harry, Hermione, and Ron running around Hogwarts are now being displayed to me through the Chinese characters. It's pretty cool. So yeah. Any recommendations on being able to learn offline while I'm on the go? I would just recommend that you get as much of the immersion content downloaded. So if you're using, and I'm assuming you're talking about our courses here. So if you're using phases 1 through 5 phases 3 through 5 at the end of every level, and this is true of the intermediate and upper intermediate course, there are zip files with all the sentences. The Mandarin Speaking and Listening Kickstarter is full of downloadable stuff. The Phrase Vault is going to have a bunch of downloadable files as well. So whatever is downloadable, get that stuff off of the course and onto your phone or whatever, and then you can listen to that and work on that. You can shadow all of the graded content in phases 4 and 5 is all downloadable. And so you can download the video actually, and you can read the text tracking while listening, walking around, speaking and listening, shadowing. You can do all that stuff. So I would just make sure that you have as much of that as possible available, and then you should be good to go. All right. Aaron says, thank you for everything. Seriously, this course has been incredible. I would not be able to make as much progress as I have without you guys. My wife's family is bilingual Chinese. Awesome, Aaron. Keep it up. Keep up the good work. And, I'm so glad that you're finding the success that you are hoping to find. And it's just every day get a little bit better. Just every day get a little bit better. You have the way to get there. Make it such a habit. Make it a part of your identity. This is just, I am a Chinese learner. I'm a Chinese enthusiast. I'm a Chinese fanatic. I have a Chinese family. I want to speak Chinese to them. What would that person do? And just do those behaviors. If you do that, then your motivation day to day, which is always in flux, our motivation is always in flux, it will be less relevant. In the same way that how good or bad I feel makes no difference on whether or not I shower. It's I shower regardless of how good or bad of a mood I'm in, because it's a habit, right? So the same thing is true of Chinese. Motivation gets you started, habit keeps you going, and do the same thing every day, and you become excellent. So, all right. Thanks, everyone. Always happy to do this. The onboarding live stream will happen every week on Wednesdays. Like I said, next week, my mother-in-law is coming into town. It's going to be a bit touch and go with the live streams, but certainly this general concept of having onboarding live streams is going to continue. I think it's been great. You guys have really liked it. So thanks so much, and 再见.